What is up, everybody? Daniel back for another episode of Southern Sorcery. Bloomburrow is finally here, and you guys know what that means. It's time for more Precon upgrade videos. So today, before we get into that, we are giving all of these Precons away. All you have to do is go to the corresponding video. All you've got to do to enter is watch this video, like, and be sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, and then jump down into the comments. Let us know what card we missed that absolutely belongs in this deck. So make sure you watch our video, watch our upgrades, and see what we put in. Tell us what we missed and what you would have put in. That's all you got to do to enter to win this Precon. So go ahead and drop down, do those things right now, and you will be able to enter for this giveaway. We are stoked. Let's get to it. So first up, the rules for all of our Precon upgrades are the same almost every time. We are going to have a $50 budget, and we are not going to take out any of the new cards printed specifically for this Precon. Sometimes that is to the detriment of the deck, but we just feel like a budget upgrade should be just that. We are going to budget low, as you've already spent money on the Precon, and then we're going to upgrade it. We're not going to just take the commander and build a deck around it. So we usually try to take out between 10 and 20 cards. So we're not absolutely just changing the feel of the Precon itself. It's just an upgrade. And just quickly before we jump into it, we want to give a huge shout out to all of our patrons. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. We do tons of box breaks and giveaways for our patrons. If you are interested in that, check out the details in the links below. So first things first, we've got to figure out what the deck wants to do, what the commander wants to do, and then upgrade based around that. So the first place we got to look for that is the commander, which is going to be Bello, Bard of the Brambles. He is a 3/3 raccoon bard and says during your turn, each non-equipment artifact and non-aura enchantment with mana value 4 or greater is a 4/4 elemental creature in addition to its other types, and has indestructible, haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So of course what this deck wants to do then is play enchantments and artifacts that are 4 mana or greater so that they become those 4/4 elemental creatures with haste and indestructible to get in for lots of damage and then draw lots of cards. So how are we going to build this? Let's look at it. So what is this deck really wanting to do? Well, it wants to make 4/4 elemental creatures from the 4-drop artifact and enchantments that we have coming in. So the deck already has some good pieces in there. We've got Berserker's Onslaught, which gives our creatures double strike. We have Garruk's Uprising, which gives our creatures trample. We have Unnatural Growth, which doubles power and toughness of our creatures. And then we have a new card, Wild Seer, the Scouring Maw. It gives our enchantment spells Cascade, so giving us card advantage. So what we want to do with this upgrade is just take the deck as it is right now, get rid of the stuff that doesn't make so much sense, put in some other stuff that does make sense. So we're going to continue with the theme of giving our 4/4 elemental indestructible hasty creatures that we are going to have with our commander, give them ways to get through with damage, so we're drawing more cards, so we're able to play more cards, and it's just going to be a runaway freight train. So real quick, let's look at the stats of this deck. First up, we have card draw or card advantage. So that's going to include things like normal card draw, but also things like Cascade or play something from exile or steal an opponent's permanent, things like that. So there are 13 of those cards in this deck, so very good. And again, our commander lets us use our elemental creatures from our artifacts and enchantments. Anytime those connect, they're going to draw you a card. So very repeatable card draw there. Next up, we have token makers. We've got 7 different token makers in this deck. So even aside from the creatures we're going to have on our turn with the artifacts and enchantments, we're also going to be populating the rest of our board with normal creatures so that we have blockers. Next, we have a slight sub-theme of treasure. So we've got 6 cards that make treasures, and we have a few more that care about treasures or use treasures in some way. We also have 7 evasion spells. So by evasion spells, I mean cards that grant our creatures some type of evasion, whether that be death touch or flying or menace or whatever the case might be. Next up, we have game closers. That is going to be things like trample, huge buffs, doubling our power and toughness. There are 5 such cards in this deck that will do that. We also have a ton of ramp in this deck. We've got 23 different cards that ramp in some way. Some of them are mana dorks that also do other things. Some of them are the cards that are going to generate treasure, but we should have no problem casting our deck and drawing cards. Lastly, we've got 5 different pieces of removal. Most of that is spot removal, and we have 1 board wipe, which is Blasphemous Act. And then lastly, we have 35 lands. The Precon came with 38. We cut it down to 35. We have so much other ramp, we might even be able to drop that down another land or 2 at the most. But yeah, tons of ramp, tons of card draw. We should have ways to churn through this deck and absolutely overwhelm our opponents. So as far as additions and subtractions go, let's get straight into that. First up, we have Omnath, Locus of Rage. It is 2 red, 2 green, so a little on the pricey side, but if you've ever played with this card, you know how good it is. It says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, make a 5/5 elemental creature. And then whenever it or another elemental creature you control dies, you can deal 3 damage to any target. So we're just going to have lands coming into play. We're going to stack up these 5/5 elemental creatures. We're going to swing out with them because we don't care if they die, because if they do, we're just going to swing 3 damage at your face or at a creature you control. Huge payoff. Awesome in this deck, considering that all of our enchantments and artifacts with 4 CMC or greater are going to be those indestructible elementals on our turn. Next, we've got Creeping Trailblazer. It is 1 red, 1 green for a 2/2 elemental. And it says other elementals you control get +1/+, so it's going to buff our elemental creatures. Next, we've got Guardian Project. This is a great card draw card. It says, when a non-token creature enters a battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another card in your graveyard, which we're in Commander, so that will never be the case, draw a card. So every time we cast any of those enchantments or artifacts, because it's happening on our turn, they're going to be seen as creatures. Guardian Project's going to draw us a card. Next up, we've got Blink Moth Urn. It is 5 colorless mana, and it says at the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, if Blink Moth Urn is untapped, that player adds colorless mana to his or her mana pool for each artifact he or she controls. So hypothetically, we'd be adding quite a bit of colorless mana. Just be mindful that this happens for your opponents as well. So if an opponent is playing a bunch of artifacts, you're just going to want to swing with this as a 4/4 indestructible elemental instead of using it for the colorless mana. Next up, we're going to have Wood Elves. It is 1 and a green for a 1/1 elf, and it says when it enters a battlefield, search your library for a forest card, then put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Notably, it does not come in tapped, so this is a really good card, as opposed to some of the other ramp spells that come in tapped. Next, we have a nice artifact. It is Eldrazi Monument. It is 5 generic mana for a artifact that says creatures you control get +1/+1, have flying, and indestructible. Unfortunately, you do have to sacrifice a creature to keep this on the battlefield, but we have a way to make a lot of tokens. And again, with like Omnath out, we can sacrifice an elemental and still deal 3 damage to an opponent. So not a terrible price to pay to give all of our creatures flying, which will help us get through and draw some more cards. We also have Goblin Anarchomancer. It is red-green for a Goblin. It is a 2/2, and it says each spell you cast that's red or green costs 1 less to cast. So a little bit of a cost reduction for our spells. We also have Leafkin Avenger for 2 green-red. And it says tap add green for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. That's going to be a majority of our creatures, so this is going to be a good mana dork in this deck. You can also pay 7 and a red into it, and it deals damage equal to its power to a target player or planeswalker. So if we have ways to buff this up, we could potentially use it to deal with some threats or as a mana sink. Next up, we want to protect our commander, as it is what allows all of these artifacts and enchantments to become the indestructible creatures on our turns. So we want to keep him on the battlefield as much as we can. So we're adding in Swiftfoot Boots, which of course gives hexproof and haste. And then we're also going to add in, similarly, Lightning Greaves, which has Shroud and haste. Next, we have a 5-drop enchantment called Asceticism. It says creatures you control have hexproof. So this is going to keep our stuff from being able to be targeted. Again, we want to keep our commander on the battlefield. He is absolutely pivotal to this game plan. It does nothing without him, so we definitely need to keep him around. This is a good way to do that. Next, we have a couple of finishers in this deck, along with some of the artifacts and enchantments that grant different kinds of evasion. We are also going to have a couple of overrun effects. First, we do have Overwhelming Stampede. It is 3 and 2 green, but it says Creatures you control get +X/+X until the end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So if we've got 5/5s or 6/6 or 8/8s out, they're going to all get that +8/+8 buff until the end of turn, allowing us to absolutely demolish some people with our hopefully evasive, indestructible creatures. And then we also have added in Enrace Forerunners. It is 5 and 3 green for a boar that is a 7/7. It has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. And it says creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain Vigilance and Trample until the end of turn. So this is a good one because Vigilance can be really handy when you're trying to swing out for that win, as a lot of the time you can't finish off everybody, and the crackback ends up being the thorn in your side, your Achilles heel, whatever analogy you want to go with, shooting yourself in the foot there. This one is great because it gives them all vigilance. So you swing out with everything. You don't have to tap down anything. You've got plenty of blockers if you can only get 1 or 2. And then on the next turn, hopefully you can swing everything else out and get that last pesky player. Next, we've got the classic Llanowar Elves. It is a 1 green for a 1/1 elf that taps for 1 mana. Then we've got Oren Frostfang. This is going to give our attacking creatures Death Touch, and whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Card draw wins games. Next up, we've got a fantastic addition here. It is Professional Facebreaker. This precon came kind of with a sub-theme of treasure. It has quite a bit of ways to make treasure. It's got a new enchantment class that allows our treasures to tap sack for 2 mana instead of just 1. Very similar to Goldspan Dragon's ability, letting you tap sack your treasures for 2 mana of any one color instead of just 1, so doubling up the production of your treasures. We also have ways to cascade off of our treasures. There's a lot of treasure payoff, so there's a sub-theme of treasure here. So we kind of decided, since Facebreaker has gotten a couple reprints, it's down in price to about $350.
About $350.
So we felt like that was a good inclusion here as well. And then last we have Gruul Warplow. This is a 4-drop enchantment, and it says creatures you control have trample. You can also pay 1 green-red into it and turn this artifact into a 4/4 Juggernaut artifact creature until the end of turn. So hypothetically, if our commander gets removed, you can still turn this into a creature if need be as a blocker. We, however, want it though for the trample effect. Okay, so what did we take out to make room for all these additions? We will hit these up next. First up, we got rid of Burnished Heart. Burnished Heart is a 3-drop artifact creature, so it misses out on the effect our commander gives, and it's kind of expensive. It's 3, and then you have to pay another 3 to sack it and go get 2 lands. We're in green. There are just way more efficient ways to ramp in these colors, so we cut that. We also cut several of the larger mana rocks that were included in this precon, mostly because if we want to use them as the elementals, we can't also tap them for mana. So they come in, they're indestructible, and have haste, so we either can't use them as attackers, we can't use them as mana rocks. So we have cut the following: Thran Dynamo, we have also cut Gilded Lotus, and Hedron Archive. Those mana rocks, we decided to go ahead and get rid of those. We also got rid of Gruul Signet. It is a signet that comes in for 2, and then you pay 1 into it, and then you get a red and a green. So the first turn you cast it, you pay 2, and then you have to pay another to get your 2 back. It just seems like there are better rates on mana rocks, so we cut that one also. We also have cut Domri, Anarch of Bolas. That is the Planeswalker. Not a bad Planeswalker, but it just kind of seems clunky in this build. We also got rid of the more expensive ramp spells. We got rid of Cultivate. Again, we cut that for Wood Elves. We also got rid of Spine of Isha. It is 7, and when it ETBs, you can destroy a target permanent. And then when it is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you return it to its owner's hand. 7 just seems like a whole lot for some spot removal when we have access to other ways to do so. In some cases, some repeatable stuff that we added in. We also cut Llanowar Loam Speaker. It's 1 and a green, and it taps for 1 mana of any color. And then you can tap it and turn a land into a 3/3 creature. We just decided to go with the Llanowar Elves instead. That way you have a faster mana dork. And we also added in The Leafkin Avenger, which is going to be a much better mana dork in this deck. It's going to tap for a whole bunch of mana as opposed to just 1 mana of any color. We also cut Starstorm from this deck. It is an X spell and red, and it deals X damage to each creature. So a pseudo board wipe that you would pay quite a bit into, which could be good on our turn whenever our stuff has Indestructible, but our commander will get swept up in that after the resolution. So just not great. We also decided to cut Decimate. Decimate can be a really good card. The problem with Decimate is, one, it's sorcery speed, it's a 4-drop, and it's not a board wipe, it is a pseudo board wipe, but the biggest problem with Decimate is that you cannot cast it unless there are eligible targets. So if you wanted to get rid of a creature and an enchantment and a land, but no one had an artifact out, or vice versa, you wanted to get rid of an artifact and there was no enchantment out, you would have to target, you know, potentially something of your own to cast this. You can only cast Decimate if there are eligible targets for all 4 of those. So it can be something that stays in your hand and is a little bit dead. We're also getting rid of a handful of lands. We're going to get rid of a forest. We're going to get rid of Path of Ancestry. Path of Ancestry could be cool. The problem is that our creature types are not going to match up with our commander. He's a raccoon bard. Most of what we're going to be casting are going to be elemental creatures, so the payoff for a tapped land in this situation is just not really worth it. We are also going to get rid of Temple of Abandon for the same reason. It comes in tapped. You can scry 1. Again, the payoff there is just not the best. There's some other lands that come in tapped, but their payoffs are much better. Things like Raging Ravine, where you can pay into it and turn it into a creature. So again, if our commander goes down for some reason and we lose our creatures, our enchantment on artifact creatures, we can pay into this and turn it into a creature. We're also going to get rid of Grumgully the Generous. Grumgully the Generous. It's 1 green, red, and it says each other non-human creature you enter the battlefield comes in with an additional +1/+1 counter. That could be useful for sure, but we just felt like the additions we made more sense than this staying in the deck. We're also going to get rid of Tendershoot Dryad. It has Ascend, so if you have 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. And it says at the beginning of each upkeep, make a 1/1 Sapperling. Sapperlings you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. So it's a good way to make some 3/3s, but we have a lot of other ways. And then again, we added in Omnath, so we're going to make some other tokens that way. And those are going to be the elemental tokens. They just make a little more sense than the Dryads. We're also going to get rid of Path of Discovery. It's an enchantment for 3 and a green, and it says when creatures enter the battlefield under your control, they explore. Not bad, still useful in here. We just opted to go with some artifacts and enchantments that are going to give our attacking creatures different kinds of evasion. Path of Discovery is good. You may not want to cut it. It's pretty good. We just needed to make some room. And lastly, we are going to get rid of Harmonize. It is 4 to draw 3 cards. Not bad, not a bad card. We're just hopefully going to be drawing a lot of cards off of our attacking creatures. And so 4 seems like a lot when we could potentially spend that on another creature instead, and then have it have haste, and then have it draw us a card immediately. So that's why that one was also on the chopping block. Guys, thanks so much for sticking around and watching this $50 budget upgrade to this Precon deck. Please give us a like and subscribe if you have not already. It helps us a ton. If you found this video helpful, again, jump down in the comments. Let us know what card that you think goes in this deck that we somehow missed to enter the contest to win this Precon for free. We would love to hear back from you guys. Look forward to interacting with you in the comments. Go follow us on all of our other social medias. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Discord, Patreon. Hit all of those up. We would love to interact with you there. We have some vibing communities there, and we'd love for you to join us. Thanks again, and as always, have an awesome night. Bye-bye.